What's up YouTube, Capital G here, talking about how many players in the TCG over the weekend just got a whole lot of really good cards, and I don't think that they even realize it. So you guys know that obviously the Extreme Force sneak peek just happened last weekend, and I actually watched a few videos from like Asian Persuasion. I watched Yugi No No's opening. I tried to, watch some videos of people opening packs and see kind of what the community was thinking about the new cards. And generally when there's a new pack, you've got a couple of super expensive cards that people definitely want to pull. You got Heavy Metaphors Electromite, which was predictably the most expensive card out of the set, it being secret rare pretty much just cemented that. Then you've got, a couple of good secondary cards. I think anybody who pulled a Skull Dread was extremely happy about that, but there's a lot of good other cards in this set that people pulled that I don't think that they realize are actually very good and possibly valuable cards. The cards I want to talk about specifically are the Mythical Beast, and a lot of people would pull them and they would just like sigh and be like, this was a waste, this is a failure, what does this deck even do? I think for starters, I think Mythical Beasts get a very bad name, and I think it's actually undeserved. I don't think people really understand fully how to use this archetype to its like maximum potential, because to be honest, I think this is one of the situations where we're going to kind of have to use this archetype in a way where it wasn't designed. You guys know Mythical Beasts are maybe like top 2 or 3 most unique pendulum archetypes ever, because they're a pendulum archetype that doesn't actually pendulum summon. Like if you were just going to build a pure Mythical Beast deck and I guess play it right out of Extreme Force, how Konami intends, with their cards exclusively and their support cards, you're not really going to pendulum summon in this deck, because all the scales are 4 and all the monster effects, or excuse me, the pendulum effects, they activate when you don't have like other cards in the other scale. So it's really not a pendulum deck that pendulum summons. I feel like we in the Yu-Gi-Oh community are often way too critical of newer archetypes. It's like we want to make an immediate judgment on them as soon as they come out of the gate and put them in, like one of 3 categories where they're either competitive, they're kind of meh, or they're just trash table 500. I feel like Mythical Beasts, and actually, I think there's actually a negative stigma around this entire set. Everybody just constantly just beats down on Extreme Force. Every person you ask, a lot of people say nothing but negative things, and yeah, I think that kind of diminishes the value of the cards, and when people get them, they're not very excited about them, even when they don't really know the potential of these archetypes. So I want to talk about Mythical Beasts and some of the awesome things that they can do, and I will say this: the spells and traps of this archetype are not very good. Like the support cards, it's actually very similar to like the Skyfang Brigade, where the monsters are pretty solid, but like the other like supplemental parts around it are not very good. But the key thing to take away from this video is most people are not understanding how to use Mythical Beasts. Despite what Konami probably wants from us, Mythical Beasts, in my opinion, are not an archetype that you're going to play as a solo standalone deck. I think they're an archetype that you can splash into other pendulum decks and you can really get some value out of these cards. Number one, the Mythical Beast engine is extremely small. You do not have to run all the cards. Really, there's only 3 cards that I would want to say that you'd probably splash into other pendulum decks. That would be Big Jackal, Big Cerberus, and Garuda. Not only are these cards some that give you a lot of utility on the field, one of them, Garuda, is actually like a little mini version of a hand trap. He's actually kind of cool. He can obviously be an MST, which is going to be good for forever. So he's spot removal against your opponent's field. When he's also level 4 and a spellcaster. They're all pendulum monsters. So the thing is, even when they get on the field, even if you can't pull off their archetype specific, I'm going to call it a gimmick, because anything relating to spell counters in Yu-Gi-Oh throughout history has always been kind of gimmicky. So even if you never get a chance to activate their monster effects, they're still pendulum monsters, guys. We just got one of the biggest pendulum boosts ever in Heavy Metaphors Electromite. So honestly, the fact that they're pendulum monsters alone means that they're going to benefit from that. And really what I like about them is it's a relatively small engine. You only have to include maybe 2 copies of those 3 monsters, so 6, and you can get so much value out of them, especially in pendulum archetypes that maybe lack a little offense or maybe lack a little bit of defense, but can use these monsters easily. Keep in mind that there are archetypes like Metaphors and Zephyra particularly is where I like these guys, that they have these like really big wide scales, and sometimes they don't have the infrastructure that's like super powerful, where maybe they're just kind of 1 stun monster away putting it on the board turn 1 from being able to kind of make that uncrackable board that pendulum magicians make. Now, I don't honestly think that you need to run these guys in Pendulum Magicians because I think that Pendulum Magicians make so many pluses and they're strong enough to where they don't kind of need it. But I've seen a lot of people in the TCG splashing these guys into Zephyra, and the results are actually pretty damn shocking. Now, I know that Zephyra have a lot of good cards, but Zephyra to me is a deck that in the TCG, it struggles with offense because when you look at like the cards, they've got a couple of counter traps that are really strong. Well, I mean, I'm talking about Yang Zings of the 9 branches. I really count it as like a Zephyr card because Secret, the Zephyr Yang Zing dude, he can search it, and he's really like the best monster, the best solo monster that they have in the Zephyr archetype. You pendulum summon him, he's gonna add one of those cards. When he leaves the field, he's gonna like add another card. So the guy can give you a whole bunch of pluses, and he doesn't really do much when he's on the field though. He has 0 attack, he's never really an offensive threat. That's when the mythical beasts come in. So there's 3 monsters, and 2 of them are actually kind of world beaters. You look at first Big Jackal. He's a 2400 attack monster. He's a walking Doka, which if you put him on field turn 1, he's probably going to eat up one of your opponent's cards. Either they're going to have to throw like a Joker at him and just say, all right, well, I got to throw something out there if I ever want to be able to use any monster effects later in my turn. I obviously don't want to throw like an Electromite, or they're going to have to give up something. Maybe it'll be a Gofu or a Candina or something on the field that they're going to have to throw at him. And obviously in the world we live in, where hand traps are becoming more prevalent, effects from the hand are becoming more prevalent as well. Not just hand traps, but cards like Astrograph Sorcerer, Lycoris activating from the hand. Jackal is probably going to take down a card by himself. He's 2400. Most people are going to have to go into their extra deck to possibly out him. Even if they have something like Eater of Millions, he'll take that down as well. All you have to do is activate 1 spell card, which, you know, you're playing him in a pendulum deck. So anytime you activate pendulum cards, that counts as a spell being activated to get that effect online. You look at Cerberus, which is an incredibly strong card. This is a 2800 monster that when it has 4 spell counters on the field can no longer be destroyed by card effects. So your opponent can't use the Regeki on it if they don't have a monster. It becomes immune to, you know, all types of destruction effects, but at the same time, not only can it take away one of your opponent's big monsters, it not only banishes it, which makes it obviously a lot more difficult to get back, but then it actually takes that monster's stats as well. So this is something that can actually kill them. And one of the cool things is about Cerberus and Jackal is if you're playing a pendulum deck, right? Let's say that you open up with just Cerberus and you don't have any of your other mythical beast cards. I want to show you how valuable this engine can be and how 1 card can make a really big difference. What you can do with Cerberus is you put Cerberus in your pendulum scale, you blow him up, you add Jackal from your deck, activate Jackal in your pendulum scale, Jackal summons Cerberus on the field, and it's like not only did you get a 2800 behemoth on the field for 1 card, but you now have your Jackal in your extra deck ready to pendulum summon. So if you're playing something like Metaphos, if you're playing Zephyr, all you got to do is set those scales up, and now you could potentially have a walking Doka as well. And if you're playing against other pendulum decks where they may say, all right, that's fine, I'll give you my Joker, and then I'm going to pendulum summon 4, and I'm going to pendulum summon the Joker back, and I'm going to vomit all over your field. That's actually where the Garuda can come in. This is a hand trap that is a pendulum card, which is actually incredible because I'm not sure that we really have those many of those. Garuda's effect can come in if your opponent is playing pendulums, you're playing a pendulum mirror match. If you do happen to use your Jackal early, his Doka effect to get something, your opponent's going to activate their scales, they're going to activate their Duelist Alliance and all their spells. They're going to give your Jackal about 1 billion counters because they think that it's inconsequential, and then you summon Garuda. He removes 3 spell counters from your Jackal, and he basically bounces. He becomes an evac at that point. When your opponent pendulum summons, all their cards go back to your hand. So it's like, dude, you have a hand trap in this archetype that's searchable. All of these monsters have been elevated by Heavy Metaphors Electromite, so even if you don't get their monster effects off, you can still go for Electromite. 2 of the 3 you're probably going to be able to pendulum summon relatively easily. I don't think there are many decks that can summon Cerberus because he is a level 8. Usually when I say the term wide scales, I mean you know, like pendulum scales of like 1 to 8. So you really won't special summon Cerberus all that much. And I actually don't know if Jackal summoning Cerberus is like, I don't know if that's an inherent summon or if that's an effect, because we don't really have any other cards like these where they're pendulum scales that summon 1 monster from the extra deck. So, you know, I'm not sure if you can solemn that or what, but I really believe that these have a lot of value. And if you look at these cards in the context of Zephyra, a deck deck that in the TCG lacks a lot of offense. Some people might say, well, Cap, if it's so good in Zephyra, why doesn't anybody run them in the OCG? Well, in the OCG, the builds of Zephyra are a lot different because they have Crystron Needle Fiber, so that card kind of is, you know, maybe top 2-3 broken most Link monsters in the game. The structure of their decks is going to be a little different, and when you look at Metaphos do have offense, especially with Rescue Bunny going back to 3, but Metaphos don't really have any good defensive cards. Like, Metaphos counter is okay, but it's not that difficult to OTK somebody through that. You know, Full Metal Alkahest is an okay card, but people don't summon it that much. So if you can summon, well, let's just say you do have a Full Metal Alkahest, and then you put a big Jackal on field, and he's a Doka, that's going to be a much better field than what you were going to make before. And again, I just want to stress, you don't have to incorporate that many of these cards into your deck to have a really big impact. So I think a lot of people are sitting around with these mythical beast cards and they're thinking they're kind of trash because the archetype itself is not very strong as a standalone deck, but you can put them in other things, just a minimal amount, and you can have a very strong impact. So let me know what you guys think of Mythical Beasts. If I was a Pendulum player who was trying to think outside the box, maybe I don't want to pick up Pendulum Magicians and have to deal with a billion mirror matches in a row. Maybe you want to play something else like Zephyra. Consider looking into these guys because they're relatively cheap. Not a lot of people know how good they are, and they can be very, very effective. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.